in a dirty city.
Fraser, this is Chicago. The only reason to open the window is to get a better aim.
Where the natives are far from friendly.
She shot my hat, Ray. I could feel air coming in through the hole.
Morning.
The point is, down here you make your own cases or they turn you into a bicycle cop.
It's time
Call me.
to call in the cavalry.
Get out.
Due south, tomorrow, 8 o'clock on BBC One.
Something's lurking under the bed on BBC Two now, but will you dare to take a look at the outer limits?
Timothy was a small-town boy and a patriotic soldier. Now he's charged with the massacre of his own countrymen in a city called Oklahoma. A profile of public enemy number 1 on BBC One. Panorama in half an hour.
The main evening news now on BBC One with Michael Burke. It's 9 o'clock.
The government's put a cap on rail fares. Most will go up by no more than the rate of inflation for 7 years. The police have voted against having to carry guns. And detectives have arrested a nurse in an investigation into mysterious deaths at hospitals across the country. Good evening. The government's made a radical change to its policy for the railways. Most fares will not be allowed to rise by more than the rate of inflation for the next 3 years. Over the following 4 years, they'll be held to 1% below the inflation rate. The Transport Secretary said the government was prepared to meet any shortfall by subsidies from the taxpayer. Some companies looking to take part in the privatisation of the railways have complained it will be another constraint on their commercial freedom. Labour's called it a last-minute political bodge.
Apart from some long-distance intercity routes, the sale of rail tickets doesn't cover the cost of running the trains. The difference comes from Treasury subsidies. And for years it's been government policy to cut the level of support and make passengers pay a more realistic price. Since 1979, ticket prices have risen faster than inflation. They're up 30% in real terms. But over the same period, subsidies have dropped from £1.7 to £1.4 billion. That's 20% down. Today, that policy was scrapped. From January, most fare increases will be pegged to the inflation rate, and after 3 years, to inflation minus 1%.
I am delighted that the government has been able to commit subsidy for this period. That is for over 7 years, for the protection of franchises, for certainty for franchisees, and for the certainty and comfort and protection of passengers.
But stopping privatised companies from charging what the market will bear requires higher Treasury subsidies to offset lower ticket income. So what does that mean for would-be train operators?
Generally speaking, in the whole passenger movement industry, the more that you can reduce prices or keep them at the same sort of level, then the greater the volume of business.
Tonight, commuters at London's Paddington station had mixed reactions.
It's so politically manipulative that I feel very cross about it.
If I could plan in some way what it's going to cost me over the next month, year, 2 years, and I've never been able to do that before, it'd be absolutely brilliant.
I'm not going to complain about prices not going up. No way.
Labour, which always advocated letting BR have more money, says there's no guarantee the loss of revenue to private operators would be met in full by the Treasury. So what it called the government's giant U-turn and an election bribe might mean reduced services because of the massive cost.
It'll be paid for by a huge increase in public subsidy that passengers will actually be subsidising themselves because as taxpayers they will be paying that subsidy, which will amount to up to £1 billion a year for each of the next 7 years.
If there is certainty around the fares regime, and that fares regime has an advantage to the passenger, it's almost certainly going to encourage more people to travel and thereby reduce the need for subsidy.
The first bids for franchises will be invited this week and go to whoever wants the lowest subsidy. Despite limited interest so far, the government thinks today's decision guarantees a successful sell-off. Christopher Wayne, BBC News.
A large majority of police officers in